Today I'm building a cabinet that's actually affordable and fits in a small workspace. And I may have run into some hiccups along the way.
Oh, are you kidding me?
Being in a small garage workshop, it forces me to get creative with a lot of the things I build, namely how to save space. And when I saw a little nook that needed a piece of furniture, I thought, great, I can build a fun-sized cabinet that can fit that space perfectly. For the toe kick of the cabinet, I decided to use a router on one side and then use that side as a template for the other side so that they could be mirror images of each other. There are so many ways to make cabinets and so many ways to make toe kicks. One popular way that I've seen is to make a separate base and then put the cabinet, which is a little deeper, on top of that base so you have a toe kick built in. I went with this method because I found it to be a little simpler and this cabinet is so small that I thought this way would work great. I cut just one dado in this whole cabinet and that's where the bottom will go, and then I'm cutting some rabbets on the side pieces and the top piece where the plywood back will go. One thing that I found really helpful when I'm building anything is using referential measurements, meaning you're referencing your project and then cutting the pieces to size. You're not cutting all the pieces to a certain length and width at the beginning of the project. That is a recipe for your pieces not fitting very well. I used to think that base cabinets had to be giant and look like this, or even this, but with the space I have available in my workshop, those sizes aren't really possible. What I can do, however, is build a smaller single base cabinet that fits in a small workshop and has lots of storage. And if you want to build one yourself, I've made detailed written and video plans for this build, and you'll find the link to those plans in the description. Putting tape on the inside edges while I'm doing the glue up does help, especially if the tape doesn't rip as you're pulling it off, but it makes cleaning up that glue squeeze out really easy. Here's a lumber buying tip if you go to a local lumber yard to get your plywood. I just discovered this at my local lumber yard when I told them I was building some shop projects. Ask if they have some reject plywood. This is plywood that has defects or imperfections, and in my case, depending on the thickness, this plywood costs me 40 to 60% less. I'm measuring the back of the cabinet to see just how wide and long I need to cut the back plywood, and I'm using my circular saw for the first cut, and because it doesn't leave the edge very nice, I'm using my track saw for all other cuts because that leaves a really nice edge. So why did I even make one cut with the circular saw? Well, I wanted to show you all how to cut down a larger piece of plywood to size, but if you're able to get a track saw, it's easier to set up and it leaves a nicer edge, but it's by no means necessary. A circular saw will get the job done. Now there will be some exposed plywood edges on this build, but for the tabletop, I thought it would look really nice to use some hardwood edge banding, which is why I cut down some ash for this very job. For the tabletop, I just glued together 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, and you saw earlier in this video me using some screws on the underside of the tabletop as clamps. But don't worry, I took those screws out once the glue dried, so I can use those for a future project. This entire cabinet only required 2 sheets of plywood, 2 sets of door hinges, and 1 set of drawer slides. So all in all, this cabinet is fairly affordable compared to a lot of cabinets that I've seen. Sometimes even when using referential measurements, your pieces can fit a little too snug and you have to use a very advanced technique to fit them in. I'm a big believer that you don't have to have a ton of expensive tools or use a lot of advanced joinery techniques to make awesome stuff. Case in point, this whole cabinet's put together with pocket holes, dados, and rabbets. This project is actually going together really nicely. Hopefully I don't make any unnecessary holes in the near future. You know when you're installing door hinges and the package of the hinge says don't over tighten and you're like, no one tells me how hard to screw. So you tighten and you tighten until they're really, really secure, and then you look on the other side of the cabinet door and there's two little holes where the screws have poked through the other side. That may have happened to me. So don't over tighten your hinges. Well, those are definitely going to be the only extra holes in this project. Definitely. I like to use playing cards to make sure the reveal is the same all the way around my doors, and then it's just a matter of measuring, marking, and securing the door hardware to the cabinet sides. All right, that looks pretty good. Nice, actually looks nice. Okay, let's try the other one. Nice. I'll adjust it a tiny bit, but that looks nice. Now let's see if they both close. Nice. Hey, that looks pretty good. Nice. Now I just gotta figure out how to get them open. There we go. Okay, this method has never failed me when making drawers. You put the stuff that's going to be to the side of your drawer fronts, and then you measure that open space. And that open space is how wide your drawer fronts and backs need to be. This cabinet's going to have a hidden drawer behind the doors, so I needed to put in some drawer supports. This will give the drawer room to slide out. Because these drawer slide supports are extra thick with 3Cs, I want to make sure they're really secure, so I'm adding one of these support pieces underneath each one. These extra supports are about 1.5 inches wide and 18.5 inches long, and I'm securing them using wood glue and 3 screws. Yes, I realize I'm adding extra supports to support the supports. After I cut all these drawer pieces to size, I'm going to do something to the drawer front that's going to make this cabinet even more affordable, and it's going to allow me not to have to buy a drawer handle. I'm going to cut out the drawer handle with my router, and this is actually a look that I think looks really nice. This drawer is just getting put together with rabbets, glue, and lots of clamps. So I mentioned earlier how there will be no more extra holes in this project, and I lied. There will be some extra holes, and you will see why in just a second. I was supposed to install the drawer slides 1.75 inches from the top of the drawer, not 1.75 inches from the bottom as you see here. All right, let's see if the drawer fits.
Oh, are you kidding me? Gosh darn it. I put the drawer slides in the wrong spot.
Now, the reason I was so frustrated at this minor inconvenience was this was one of the last things I had to do to finish this project, and it was at the end of a long day of building, so I was a little tired, but it was a simple fix.
Pretty nice. I like it.
I like to put finish on my shop projects, yes, because it adds a little bit of protection, but mostly because it makes it look a lot nicer and really makes that grain pop. Now, I'd never really seen this 2-door, 1 hidden drawer look in a cabinet like this before, and I think it looks pretty nice, but let me know what you think in the comments. You can probably tell that I like to use spacers to get my measurements just right. And for the magnetic door stop, I'm using a 3/4 inch plywood spacer and cutting it to the exact size it needs to be. I'm making my doors recessed to 1/16 of an inch and not flush with the front for a very specific and technical reason. I feel like it. And I think it adds some depth to the cabinet. Finally, I get to make this area of my shop look a lot nicer, and I get some help from a very special guest, my beautiful wife.
Thank you. I love you.
I present to you the fun-sized base cabinet, and remember, be kind, be awesome.
Yep, that's not going anywhere.